Okay, that was a really, really excellent set of insights that Noel Sharkey gave in the first half of the show in regards to the fact that we have to keep an eye on government and how they use such things as new technologies. The idea that, we're developing autonomous weaponry, and we should make sure that we stay in control. Not just that humans themselves stay in control, but that the people have a say into how these technologies are used as we develop robots and drones and so forth that will increasingly become more, maybe thinking, maybe being able to carry on missions without absolute human control. I think there's some very major questions there we have to keep in mind, and we have to make sure that we don't just leave it into the hands of the various governments, because they're all trying to one-up each other and come up with new strategies, new weaponry, and so forth, which in many respects, who knows? It might actually wind up getting out of control. Who knows? I mean, we might have a Battlestar Galactica scenario where the robots finally take over and they don't necessarily like us. But anyway, getting more down to just what's going on this very day, and in reference to freedom and human rights and so forth, I think it's important that we don't lose sight of these issues and not take them for granted. You see, I think basic liberties are like health. You can get yourself in really great shape. I mean, you can go out and run and swim. Now, let's say you're training for a triathlon, and you get yourself in just superb shape. You do your triathlon, you're proud of your accomplishments and so forth. And then let's pretend that you just sit back and you don't do any exercise. Now, you put your plaque on the wall that says, you did a great job. Let's say you were first place in some competition. And people come over and they look at your plaque and they're like, wow, you won that triathlon. That is really impressive. And you're going, yeah, I'm in great shape. But let's say you're not keeping yourself in shape. Little by little, you're not eating right, you're not exercising anymore. Now, you're not going to suddenly go from triathlete to, just totally obese and out of shape and threatening your health overnight. It's not going to happen in a month, but it will happen eventually. It will creep in, and then you will wind up being something totally opposite of that triathlete you were. And human rights is very similar to that, because just because you have rights to freedom of speech and religion and in the case of the United States, that own guns and all these other things, just because you have it today does not guarantee you have it tomorrow or next week or next year or in the next decade. Take a look what's happened in the last 10 years, or better yet, go back to 2001. So, you got about 12, 13 years there. Take a look at the way people see human rights. Take a look at the way we are basically just being indoctrinated into something totally different than what the United States was. We have, for instance, we go to the airport. Now, I'm not saying that they've never had airport security and that they don't have airport security in other countries. But we have like the TSA there, and there's all kinds of issues in regards to the way that they search people and, if that's right or not. And so, but that's something that people have kind of gotten used to, and the only thing that the people that support it have to do is suddenly scream 9/11, and all of a sudden that just shuts everyone up, and at least most of them. And then you have other issues. I mean, you have these checkpoints I remember I was actually involved in the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers campaigns in the 1980s when it first started. I thought drunk driving was horrible, that, there's this carnage on the roads. Many more children, for instance, die due to drunk drivers than from gun accidents in the United States. Many more. Okay, so if people are concerned about kids getting hurt and killed, they should be looking at what's happening on the road still. But in the 1980s, that's when you had the start of the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. And I remember how controversial it was just to put up a police checkpoint in front of a bar that closes at like 2 a.m. I remember that was just super controversial, that you were pulling people over just because of the suspicion that they may have drank too much and now were getting on the road without having without observing anything like the car veering or any of these other telltale signs. Now, the interesting thing is, look at how we've evolved since then. You've got military checkpoints in the United States. You've got police checkpoints. You've got border patrol checkpoints, not just on the border, but, way into the interior. You've got these checkpoints. And essentially, it's getting people used to the idea that they should be stopped, and people dressed up in often paramilitary uniforms with, well, not even paramilitary. I mean, essentially they are paramilitary if they're the police, but then they're dressed up in, uniforms. But if they're dressed in actual uniforms, I mean, that's what you see coming at you. And then you've got the idea that, the idea they could just basically immediately ask you for your ID, even though essentially there's no law that says you have to carry ID on you. And yet, I mean, if you're in a car and you're a passenger, why should you have to supply any kind of identification? Of course, they're going to say, well, it's in case you're an illegal alien or something like that. If they want to deal with illegal aliens, you would think that they would be doing more on the borders, but they stop people. They stop people in cars and use this as an excuse. I don't care how you feel about the immigration issue. I mean, it is kind of an excuse. I don't think there's too many people crossing the border using the freeways to do it. Now, the thing is that, again, it's getting people used to the idea that it's okay, that the government has a right to stop you and so forth. I remember it was around the year 2000, maybe in 1999. I don't remember completely. But there was this issue in regards to, well, people were thinking that the NSA was basically looking into people's emails. And I remember there was this campaign. It was going to be called Jam the MSA or something like that. And essentially, it was sort of seen as a conspiracy theory. People were thinking that, okay, well, yeah, they're listening to our phone calls. Sure, right. Well, it's been proven right. But the thing is, when this first came out, people were like, oh, you've got to be joking. No way people would do that. And then later, I went on a trip to China with some people, and some of them were thinking about buying mobile phones because you could get them really cheap there. And then there was a couple of people in the group that were saying, hey, wait a minute, maybe the Chinese government listens in on your phone conversations. They might put something into the phone. I had no evidence whether they did that or not. I don't have any evidence whether they do so or not today. But the thing is, that was enough to cause some people not to want to buy anything, not to buy a phone. Now, that's kind of interesting in the sense that today, look at how things have changed. I mean, Edward Snowden pretty much proved that this is going on. Okay? And that's why they want to go after him. He just said, well, here's what they're doing. They're gathering information. He never let out any information saying, hey, terrorist, or something like that. Look what the government's doing. All he did was let the information out that people are being people are being monitored by the government, and all this data is saved. Now, the weird thing is the government, even today, even after it's been proven that they are doing it, they still come out and say, no, not happening. And then you got people that justify it. I mean, you got people like, who is it? Jeb Bush, and I heard that, there's another one of the ones that came out and said that this was justified. And essentially, the, I mean, it's a situation though where most Americans don't even care. I mean, there's issues relating to sports, they care. There's issues related to celebrities, they care. Or at least they're told to care. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe the corporate media is trying to get them to care about these issues and focus their attention on other things. Because really it is true. What you see on the front page of a newspaper, for instance, is what you feel is the most important. If you find that it's on page 27 of section D in the newspaper, for those of you who still use newspapers, then you feel like it's probably not a major issue. Or if you see something reported in, let's say, the Washington Times or the Washington Post or the New York Times, it's probably going to be seen as more important than if it's reported in a local newspaper or an alternative newspaper. That's just the way people see it in reference to how they interpret these kinds of things. And so, yeah, people are accepting this sort of thing. But now let's take a look at some really interesting aspects of this. And I just thought I would throw out some quotes here. The thing that really inspired me to deal with this particular issue is that I heard something that was from, England, of all places. And there's a quote here. It was in the Independent, the UK Independent, and it's David Cameron. He just won election. I'm not going to go into that. He didn't get a majority of votes. So the next time people from England might say something, if you encounter one about the way our electoral college in the United States operates, then you could easily ask them about how the system elected David Cameron in the last election with something like 37% of the vote. So anyway, Cameron was quoted, and it's gone around the internet a little bit. For too long, we have been a passively tolerant society, saying to our citizens, as long as you obey the law, we will leave you alone. Let me repeat that for you. Okay, it's right here. For too long, we have been a passively tolerant society, saying to our citizens, as long as you obey the law, we will leave you alone. Now, that should scare people, the idea that you're kind of saying, oh, wait a minute, maybe there's been just a little bit too much freedom. Now, I'm going to contrast that and with someone who had some beefs with the way the British government was set up about 220 or 30 years ago, and that was Thomas Jefferson, where he stated that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. He had a whole bunch of excellent quotes about freedom and liberty. I would really, really encourage people to look those up. Just type in Thomas Jefferson, freedom and liberty. But there was another individual, Benjamin Franklin, the one I often quote on this show, question authority. He said it. In fact, he said that it was the right and duty of a patriot to question authority. And he said something else here that's a little bit, a little bit more addressing David Cameron. And that was, any society that will give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither, and they will lose both. Okay, what does he mean by that? And what does Jefferson mean about eternal vigilance? You see, the problem I think you have when it comes to government is that essentially, you put people in government or any institution, and you're trying to figure out what you can do that's different. or how to get the job done that you're given. And so essentially, no matter what you do, I don't care if you're on the student government of a high school, okay? The thing is that if you just go in saying, well, I just want to keep the status quo, let's just keep things are running okay, let's just keep them running okay. People are going to look at you like, well, why are you here? I mean, there's an assumption built in to government at all levels that you have to do something. You need to change something. You need to pass some laws. You need to institute something, or else you're not doing your job. Well, in kind of don't you think that's actually kind of saying, well, wait a minute, your role is to change what might already be pretty good? So when Jefferson said you have to have eternal vigilance, he was basically saying the people have to keep an eye on what the government's doing at all times. And the reason why the founding fathers of the United States set government up the way they did, where it was all broken up into different branches, was because they knew that there was always, well, just a regular person. You know that whole, what was it, Burke, who said the power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely? There was a recognition that even good people, if given power, will exercise unrighteous dominion over other people. Now think about if you elect people who are driven by ambition and power in the first place. Well, their goal is going to be to try to change things for the worse when it comes to freedom and liberty. Now, I'm not making any comments. I'm not saying that all government people are necessarily evil, but the process of basically just being in the legislature in general will mean that you should keep an eye on what people are doing, because they may be passing laws that will take a little bit of your liberty away. And they're not going to just suddenly, it's not like George Bush or Barack Obama or David Cameron are all of a sudden going to say, hey, look, I just found a copy of 1984, and it looks like a pretty good book when it comes to government. Well, no, I'm not saying that they would actually say that. Anyway, I am saying that it's very easy for government leaders to take the easy way out and basically say, oh, well, we need to take away a little bit of freedom here or liberty there because it's for the good of the masses. It's for the good of the body politic, so to speak. But the thing is, then, that's just like our triathlete who, skips exercise and eats a little too much after the big win. He or she is going to finally reach a stage where they may as well never have been in the triathlon because they'll be totally out of shape. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen eventually. And that's why Jefferson said you can't just passively sit by. Even I don't have the quote in front of me, but John F. Kennedy said that the weakest link in a chain, in reference to democracy, is the most uninformed person, because they can still vote. Now, the thing is, I'm not saying that there's an IQ scale when it comes to being uninformed. Now, there's some pretty smart people out there that really don't take the time to look up things, but there's also a lot of people out there who really they trust their government. And that's not a good idea. That is really not going to be something that is going to benefit people in the long run. And so oh yeah, sorry about that. I got interrupted by a phone call there in the middle of taping this. But anyway, the thing that we have to look at is that, I'm going to quote something from Thomas Paine here before I go on. I lost kind of train of thought. Those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must, like men, undergo the fatigue of supporting it. So yes, to keep a democracy, to keep freedom, you need to exercise your freedoms. You need to exercise your rights, and you need to expect them, or else each generation will have a little bit less, and they will expect a little bit less. And the thing is that we take a look at what I said before. You know, you have checkpoints for everything now. You have people, you know that you're being listened to. And then people just share really, really personal information on Facebook and so forth. And so I think we're actually developing a system in which eventually we're going to wind up looking like what was the name of that Christian Bale movie? Equilibrium. Okay? I mean, when I first saw Equilibrium, I was thinking, whoa, that's a really dystopian movie. And then now I keep thinking about when they have the crowds there and they've got the police dressed up in those black riot gear uniforms, and you've got those blimps that are flying over and monitoring people. You know, nowadays we kind of live in that. We're kind of getting into that kind of weird thing about accepting armored trucks going down the street. This is the United States, of course. You wouldn't see this so much in Europe yet. But the thing is that in the United States, you know, people are getting used to the idea that their police department might own an attack helicopter. Their police department might own automatic weapons. I'm not talking about, you know, the kind that people go out and hunt with and stuff like that, or go target practicing or whatever. I'm talking about the kind that people use in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, you know, police departments being given those by the military. And all of these other gadgets that, you know, what's a police department need in a small town need with a tank? That just does not seem like something that you would need. Now, lastly, I would like to zero in on a quote from John Adams. But a constitutional government, once changed from freedom, can never be restored. Liberty once lost is lost forever. Do you know, right now, you know, you've got some of the Republicans running for office who are basically saying, oh wait, we can't do anything with our Patriot Act. We can't scrap that. So anyway, again, got cut off by incoming call there. The thing is that once you give up on freedom, once you hand something over, just like with the Patriot Act, just like with NSA snooping, it would be, it would be really, really difficult to then pull it back. Not because it's the wrong thing to do, but it's just like when you have these legislatures in which the legislator wants to look really tough on drugs, so, you know, they come up with some sort of 3 strikes, you're out, you know, so essentially, you know, you wind up with people that get caught with marijuana and they're serving these horrendous jail sentences for it because, you know, you want to pass laws that make it look like you're getting tough. And the same has now happened in regards to national security, quote unquote. And so there are some of the candidates for president right now are saying we need to scale back things. Rubio, Bush, you know, Clinton. I don't think you're going to get much of a change in the way the system is if any of those guys get elected. And that's kind of sad. And some of the others, I mean, you know, Rand Paul, he's promised to change it. But the thing is that, again, even if you did get Rand Paul in, you'd still have the Congress and the Senate that's still trying to look tough, both the Democrats and Republicans, and I'm not sure whether you could really get rid of it. So, anyway, the thing is, watch out when you hear people say, well, maybe we need to kind of scale back on this freedom. Because once it is lost, just like going back to our triathlete, suddenly our triathlete realizes, oh my gosh, my blood pressure's up, my heart rate's up, my cholesterol's up, I better exercise. he or she's not going to gain that triathlete body back overnight. It's going to take a long and grueling process to get there. So the thing is that it's better to make sure that we keep our eyes on what's going on. We focus, we communicate to others, we communicate to our representatives, and do our best so that, maybe 20 years from now when your kids or grandkids are saying, wow, when did America change, or whatever country you're in? Why did it change like this? Why do we have this system now? And you don't want to be the one saying, well, it just happened, because you didn't do anything to try stopping it, working within the political system to try to make positive change, or to preserve the freedoms that exist today. So anyway, well, that's just some things I would like you to think about. And, thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you next week here at UCY TV's Unlock the Door Radio, here with Michael Cross.
You may not realize it, but artificial intelligence is all around us. We rely on smart machines to scan our checks at ATMs, to navigate us on road trips, and much more. The field of artificial intelligence is pushing new boundaries. Ari Srinivasan has the first in a series of stories about it and the concerns over where it may lead.
Elon Musk, founder and CEO of Tesla Motors and SpaceX, is not exactly a Luddite bent on stopping the advance of technology. But he says AI poses a potential threat more dangerous than nuclear weapons.
I think we should be very careful about artificial intelligence. If I were to guess at what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. And with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon.
Musk recently donated $10 million to the Future of Life Institute, which is focused on keeping AI research beneficial to humanity. Add his voice to a list of bright minds like physicist Stephen Hawking, Microsoft founder Bill Gates, and several leaders in the field of artificial intelligence. Among them, Stuart Russell, who heads the AI lab at the University of California, Berkeley.
What concerns you about how artificial intelligence is already being used or will be used shortly?
In the near term, the biggest problem is the development of autonomous weapons. Everyone knows about drones. Drones are remotely piloted. They're not robots in a real sense. So there's a person looking through the camera that's on the aircraft and deciding when to fire. An autonomous weapon would do all of that itself. So it chooses where to go, it decides what the target is, and it decides when to fire.
He's concerned about weapons like the British Taranis. It's featured in this promotional video by BAE Systems, a former NewsHour underwriter. The Taranis is currently operated remotely by humans, but this drone is outfitted with artificial intelligence and will be capable of operating fully autonomously. Russell testified to the United Nations, which is considering a ban on such weapons that can target and kill humans without requiring a person to pull the trigger.
I think there's a fundamental moral issue about whether it's right for a machine to decide to kill a person. It's bad enough that people are deciding to kill people, but at least they have perhaps some moral argument.
The Anti-Media Radio, your host Nick Burnaby here on UCY.tv.